Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. We have been joined by people from all over the world, and it is a pleasure to see you connected today. I'm going to take a very few brief minutes to welcome you on behalf of ICW, that is the International Community of Women Living with HIV, Women for Global Fund, and the Latin American Platform team. My name is Karen Dunaway, and I'll be your facilitator for the next 90 minutes. Thank you for joining today's session on Global Fund 101, Reinforcing Gender Equality for Women Living with HIV and Women in Key Populations to have meaningful involvement on the GC7, the Grand Cycle 7, funding requests processes, and also to increase gender equity in the prioritization processes. Before going in depth in today's agenda, I just want to remember some of best practices to have a beneficial session and beneficial webinar. The chat is enabled, so you can participate, share your thoughts, and also questions, some comments, and we will love to know where are you joining us from today. And also, on the conversation in the chat, be also respectful to others' opinions as well. There will be a space for Q&A at the end, but you can share your questions in the Q&A tab as well during the webinar. And during the course of this webinar, we will share some links that will direct you to today's PowerPoints and also some supporting documents related to the strengthening of women's participation in the GC7, the Grand Cycle 7. Finally, this session is enabled with simultaneous translation into English, Spanish, French, Arabic, and Portuguese. So big thanks to the amazing interpreters for supporting us today. Every now and then, I will be making a reminder on the chat for those who join us later about interpretations, and I'll periodically share the links for the PowerPoints. To access the simultaneous translation, you can click on the word logo and choose the language of your choice. But if you are on a cell phone, you can click on the 3 dots at the bottom right, if that hasn't changed, and choose simultaneous interpretation. And without further ado, we can get into today's topic. We have a spectacular panel with experts on the topic of community participation, gender, and GC7. We will have ICW here, Women for Global Fund. We have the Global Fund also that will be talking about gender equality markers, and we will have the participation of UNAIDS and one of the regional platforms. And I will direct the first presentation of the day to Immaculate. Immaculate is member of ICW, and she has been doing an amazing and incredible job in ensuring the participation of women during the writing processes of the proposal. And she will talk us about making the Global Fund more accessible to women and growth. So Immaculate, the floor is yours.
Yes, Sophie, thank you so much. I don't know whether you're able to hear me. And I'm unable to, I don't know what has happened to my video. It is telling me I cannot start my video, and the host has stopped it. So I don't know whether you can enable me so that people are able to see who is speaking.
We cannot see you, but we can hear you well.
Okay. So here on my end, it is showing that you stopped the video. I don't know that you're able to enable it.
Let me check if I can do it from here. But we can go ahead and start the presentation.
Okay, thank you. So hello everyone. I'm Immaculate Omcha. I'm from Uganda. I'm a member of ICWEA, and I am privileged to sit on the ICW Global Steering Committee and East Africa, ICW East Africa Board of Governors. And I'm privileged to make this presentation today. It is a very short presentation, basically sharing my learnings as a woman living with HIV who has been participating in this process for the last 2 cycles of grant making. I'll be sharing my experience on how to make it accessible for women and girls. Kellen? Yes, so I'm going to look at 4 areas. One is inclusivity at policy level as a starting point for us as women to take note. Then how are the community consultative sessions taking shape in different countries before you enter the room of writing? What does it mean to strengthen partnership and innovations? What works for women in terms of preparing ourselves for the process? And then at country coordinating mechanism, what do we need to make sure that women fully participate in the process? So my discussion will focus on those 4 points of speaking. Helen? Yes, so inclusivity at national level. From my experience and from what I see happening here in Uganda, is one as a starting point as women and girls, if we want to participate in this process, we need to ensure that way before the process starts, what policies do we have? And what are the interventions the policies are guiding? What are the thematic areas the country is focusing on in terms of addressing the needs of women and girls? And then specifically looking at what is there for women in all diversity. And then you go to beyond policies at the ministerial level, then policies in terms of laws, assessing what are the laws and policies supporting, what efforts are they putting in place in terms of addressing HIV for women and girls, and then go further and assess what are the gaps. That gives you a background on where is the country focusing. And then also where are the needs of women and girls at the high level. Why is this important? Because for you to enter the process of writing, you need to have the basis of what is your basis as a country. Why do you think these are the needs? And this can only be found in our laws and policies. They are the ones that shape the programming of the country. Then moving forward is to look at community mobilization. As community, as women, how well are you coordinated? How well are you mobilized? And you need to start the consultations as early as possible. For us in Uganda, the process is a 3-year process. So you have 3 years of implementation, but in the final year, you start to prepare for the next grant making. So at that level is when you start now looking at, for us as a community, what are our priority areas? Now, speaking from from our experience is for us as Uganda, through the leadership of ICW Eastern Africa, we had to go back to the women and girls living with HIV at community level and start mobilizing voices right from the community. The most of times we intend to focus at national level, look for the usual faces, usual people, the same advocates to identify issues. But those issues lose touch from the challenges and the problems that are at the grassroots level. So the key strategic point was, how do we collect the issues of the community, the issues of women who are aware at the grassroots to address, to form the issues at national level. So we held consultative meetings with the women. But in most cases, we do not have enough or sufficient capacity to put all these issues in one document. So we look out for support. And the support now is to clean up the shopping list that we always have. Because it is very important that as we go in the process, in the writing room, that our priorities are smart enough to form what to align to the national agenda in terms of addressing the needs of women and girls. So having a technical person to support the women, and this is where we always have a biggest gap, that the women are not well facilitated to have that person who sits in the room with both the leaders at national and leaders at community level to clearly articulate issues and have them well written for presenting to the national working group or to the government actors that are going to sit and start cleaning up this process. So having a resource person is very, very key in terms of ensuring that women and girls' involvement in this process is very key and well respected. So from this resource person or support of priority setting, it is very, very key to identify who are those key women and girls who can now move with the issues that have been set into the room. Because the process is that after the consultative, these issues are tabled in a national dialogue, which brings all actors from government to civil society to other partners who are contributing into the process, and then they are endorsed there. If women and girls are not engaged in this process at national level, and the issues of women that have been collected from the community are not endorsed at that level, then you lose it outright from the start. So it is very, very key important to always identify who are those women and girls strong, who can stand and challenge when the opposite counterpart is trying to water down the issues, to be in that room of dialogue, but also take it on to the grant making. So for us as Uganda, our experience has been as women living with HIV, how do we strategize? Right now, I must say we are over, I think, over 6 women in the room. Majority of us are women in the writing process, because for Uganda, we are now in the writing process. We are actually meant to be submitting this right month. So we've been in this room as women living with HIV right from the start. And this started at coordination. And then when you're in the room, how do you keep yourself together? Because there are different thematic areas that the coordinators, CCM and government will put you in. So you find you have disease-specific writing tables, and then you have the cross-cutting, which is community system strengthening. So the strategic point there is, how do you ensure that every writing table we have a woman or a girl living with HIV presenting issues of women? And in most cases, this is where we miss it out. You find that you have very many women and girls living with HIV on the HIV disease component, but we are missing them in TB, we are missing them in RISSH. And the reason in most cases is we don't have support to bring all these women in the room, even if we wanted. So yeah, pausing there is now, how do you ensure that the women who are in this room articulate issues and ensure that the plight of women and girls living with HIV are there across the 3 diseases? I think that's what I spoke to, that it's important to have representative of women living with HIV on every writing table, which is across the disease and the 3 cross-cutting issues. Then as you're there, what our experience here in Uganda as we are in this room writing is, how do you ensure that you play an oversight role at every stage? The issues are changing. Why the issues are changing is because we are slicing one cake. We are slicing one cake with government. We are slicing one cake with the private actors. We are slicing one cake as civil society. So to ensure that your priorities that were moved from that were approved at national dialogue continue to the end of the process is very, very critical. And that means that you need strong advocates in the room who can stand and challenge the power that is usually in this room. Next slide, Kellen. Yes, strengthening partnership is very, very key. And this is how do we ensure that we work with women in all diversity. So if you look at the guidance from Global Fund, is right from the start. It is disease specific, but also community specific. So you have interventions for sex worker, interventions for transgender, then interventions for general population where women women and girls living with HIV fit, but also there are interventions for people with a disability. So right from the start is how do you strategize and ensure that we have representatives on this table who identify with the communities that can, and they can easily articulate issues at that level. So if there are issues for sex workers per se, can we have a sex worker on that table? Because they'll understand the issues better. If it is issues for the trans community, can we have a woman who is a trans on that table? It is very, very key because they connect and can easily articulate the issues. Then how do we strategize with other actors? Right now for us, what is working for us is closely working with our PRA2, our principal recipient too, because they have a critical interest. For Uganda, PRA2 was already pre-approved, same as PR1. So we came into the writing room when we know who is going to hold money for the communities. So having that PRA2 who is holding money for the community strategical on our side is enabling us to ensure that we have issues for women and girls. But also specifically, we have a component that is clearly looking at how much goes, for example, to adolescent girls and young women. For this grant in Uganda, we have around 14 million US dollars for just specific women and girls. But if we don't have the affected community on that table, chances of losing that money to go into, let's say, procurement. Right now, we've been struggling on the table with the government wanting that money to go into just buying scholastic materials, yet there are so many community interventions that are needed. If that is not, if you don't have the eye, then you lose out on that kind of money. So strategic partnership and collaboration is very important. The other thing that I pick as a learning is innovations. How are we innovating and clearly documenting our work? And this is where government mostly challenges us and say that you do not have the documents that speak to the work that you're pushing or speak to the priority. So having that is key. And looking at the innovations that work for women. In our learning here has been that the government will tell you, let's streamline and have this under the government structure. But you'll find that the government structure does not properly work for the community. So how do you firmly put that we have our own innovations that we know closely work for the community, but mostly for our women and girls living with HIV. In terms of access, let's say to treatment, access to other SRHR services, but also knowing that our other sisters in the KP movement, they may not easily access services in the government led facilities. So that is very, very key. Then what are from my observation is our biggest gap, and if there could be a way that we champion this, is having a woman and girl representative on the CCM table. As it is now, the country coordinating mechanism, we have seat for people living with HIV generally. We have a seat for KP. We have a seat for young people, but we do not have a specific seat for women and girls. So I think there the issues get mixed up right at who is defending the issues of women and girls living with HIV at community. If we mix it with the general community of people living with HIV, then we miss a point at one point. So it is very key that as probably a community of women living with HIV, and as we advance and roll it, this discussion, we need to start advocating for a seat for a woman or a girl at CCM. Key also is how is the community connected to the country mechanism representative from civil society, and what is the feedback mechanism in place? Definitely the challenge is there is no funding that will enable the communities to sit with their representatives and see what is happening at that strategic level of providing an oversight at CCM, and how does the community issues feed into what they are discussing in those boardrooms. That is also not strongly put in place in terms of having these two, the right holders and the representative meet to have issues addressed or tabled together. Next, as I conclude, yes, Keller? Yes. So for me, what is important to note as a community is we need to ensure that advocacy continues throughout the process. I must say it has not been easy for us as CSOs and right holders in the rooms where we are now. And we had to take it an extra step. We have had incidences where we put our issues at the community, and then you go to sleep in the morning, you come, the issues you put last night are not there. So we had a lot of back and forth with government and with the key writers. And why is because most of the technical support that we have in the room is the support that comes from government. We do not have a specific community consultant to help communities articulate their issues. So when you sit with a consultant that has come from the government arm, in the night we'll have to feed and have issues addressed as per what is coming from orders from above, as we call it here. So that process is, how do you keep an eye there? So for us, when we realized that that is happening, and we made sure that we raise a voice every Friday, there are presentations happening, and you're able to track. On Monday, we wrote this. Friday, it is not there. We kept raising voices, but nothing was changing. We took it in a different way. Like I'm saying, advocacy continues. So we had to apologies on the typo. We had to do a petition. We petitioned our CCM chairperson and copied in all the relevant, including Geneva Global Fund. And I'm happy to say that that petition caused our doors to open. Geneva had to meet with us and ensure that we align what is in for community and what is in for community under the government strategy. Where is the problem coming from is that there is a strategy under government that is showing community structures for under the government structure. And then we are saying that no, that community structure does not cover the structure for communities as we are, and also does not look into the role of civil society in all this. So to come into an agreement with government became hard until Global Fund Geneva had to come in and intervene and ask, and we actually had to put our feet down and say we need our specific community consultant at this level where we are doing the gap analysis. And we are happy to report that that worked. Global Fund Geneva listened to us, and we are now going forward, moving as we expect and having the voice of the community respected. So key is that for us to note, as for the countries who have not yet started this process, is when you're in that room with the government, don't feel that you've been put in a box. Know that the big voices, which is our leader, Global Fund, is always available to listen to the needs of the community, which I think is very, very positive for us in the Global Fund process, that Global Fund listens to the community and knows the key role the community plays. So I just wanted to flag that, and then again flag that coordination is very, very key within amongst the community. That in most cases we are in the room, even us as community, as women and women living with HIV, and we start tearing ourselves apart. But if you come and know that what we are putting on paper is not for our own organization, is not for our own needs, but rather for the needs of the broader community, then you cohesively work on the issues as one voice, as one community. And once you're coordinated, then you're able to beat the other power that may want to push the interventions or the priorities for communities aside. And I think this is my last slide. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Immaculate, for sharing your experience in Uganda. It has been a really strong and powerful work that you have been doing along with other networks. Thank you very much. And Another thing that we want to discuss here in this webinar is about the gender assessments. There has to write the proposals and to start doing the process in the grant cycle 7, there must be a gender assessment to understand what is and how can you do it. And we have today Angela Cáceres from Women for Global Fund, because Women for Global Fund has been a lead on gender assessments. They have been doing gender assessment for a couple of years now. And we invite Angela as well to share with us about what is a gender assessment, how can we do it, and what happens after we do the gender assessment. So I'm going to give my floor to Angela. Angela? Angela has told me that she has some internet issues before.
Hi, Sophie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I'm sorry. This is Archana Patkar. I didn't hear my name, so I didn't unmute. But thank you for inviting me. And it was really wonderful to hear the very practical, absolutely spot on guidance from Immaculate. So that really prepared the ground for, I think, what I'd like to share on the gender assessments. So my name is Archana Patkar, and I support the Equality and Rights for All practice in UNAIDS Geneva. And now I'm in a different role, which is overall really looking at the gender equality issues across the HIV response. But when I started supporting UNAIDS on the gender assessments, I worked into countries to really try and work with the existing assessments, etc., to focus on conducting the gender assessments in Morocco and Sierra Leone. What I'm going to share is really a few lessons from those, and I'm going to start with the positive. And of course, really try and link to what Immaculate has said in terms of voice, accountability, participation, and really being at the table for those who count at every single step of the way. So thanks again for this opportunity. And let me bring you some insights from Morocco and Sierra Leone. In Morocco, it was a team of 2. I worked with a senior researcher academic in the university to work with the government of Morocco, Ministry of Health, to conduct a gender assessment and to bring these recommendations to the Global Fund proposal, but also to the revision of the National Strategic Plan, which, as you may know, are the two of the key areas of integration for recommendations from any GA in any country. I mean, just to give you a snapshot right now, UNAIDS has supported about 16 gender assessments, most of which have been completed in the last 2 years, and about 6 are ongoing, 6 to 8 for 2023. So some key lessons from Morocco. And I think some of them may be surprising, but since this was my experience, I would really like to bring it to you. One, that ministries of health are not averse to surprises and are open and ready to listen if we engage with them right up front in a gender assessment without jargon, but with practical, real experiences and participation from the populations across key populations, across networks of women and girls. If we listen with them to what these groups and individuals need, and then look at the evidence in country, especially in terms of the epidemic, and make a compelling case. They are usually quite willing to shift course and look at possibilities despite repressive laws to bring health to all. And from that, I mean across the continuum of prevention, treatment, and care. This was certainly my experience in Morocco, where joint conversations with young, very young, under 15, actually, adolescent girls and boys, a lot of college students, despite repressive, not very enabling age of consent laws, services that do not encourage younger adults, as well as a kind of non-recognition of gender identity in all its diversity, we were able to work with the ministry to really recognize the dynamism of the epidemic in terms of acknowledging the presence of trans communities, listening to trans men and women, listening to adolescents, and actually post assessment, um, conducting exploratory studies on their own to now embrace these as areas where they had to adjust existing interventions to embrace these groups and ensure that no one is left out. The reason I want to bring this positive experience in is I want to complement what Immaculate said, as we must ensure the voices that matter at the table. We must also ensure that duty bearers listen to these voices in a non-confrontational, non-critical way where we always direct criticism at governments. The lack of listening and dialogue together often is the biggest barrier. And we found that breaking that barrier in a very kind of, non-critical way opened the doors to partnerships. Sierra Leone is another example where I'd like to bring in the issue of disability. The Sierra Leone government was always very, very engaged on the issues confronting young women and girls. However, the HIV response had never really engaged with a whole parallel stream where there's a dedicated ministry and sub-agencies dedicated to the different kinds of disabilities that confront people in all their diversity. And bringing these groups together with conversations really, really helped to open the door again to understand what the avenues for working with these groups might be. I give you these two examples because I feel the gender assessments, by being generic on their recommendations, fail to dive deep sometimes into very narrow vertical segments of a population. For example, if we talk about adolescent girls, it's not good enough. We really need to talk about the intersecting inequalities that confront adolescent girls, that confront adolescent boys, the need for dialogue between the two and the intersecting groups. For example, visually impaired adolescent girls have certain needs and issues that are not recognized anywhere, whether it is healthcare providers, whether it is their own families, whether it is their communities. We need to really listen and understand and learn, and then together let them really determine what needs to change and guide us. Those are just two examples of doors that opened as a result of having the people who matter, who the response is working for at the table, but also duty bearers at the table. And the gender assessments, now moving back a step to what they attempt to do, attempt to use the existing EPI data to identify gaps that may not be reached, but also to really look at the inequalities within these gaps so that some people are not able to benefit from the intervention services and resources made available by the health sector, by networks working on these issues, and by communities working on these issues. And I think I would really like to end by saying that the most powerful lesson from these assessments was, linked to also what we put in the recommendations. Very often, the recommendations of GAs are a long list. We know that, well, I'm afraid after more than 6 decades in this world, I'm quite aware that gender is a complex, intersectional, the entwined issue, and we won't solve everything in one day. So we need to be quite clear and practical and isolate the game-changing issues, looking at the opportunities in country, but also the gaps to hit some of these hard, but very aware that they will not change tomorrow. So our recommendations do need to be selective, do not need to shy away from the tough realities, but must not be look like a long laundry list. And must also look at incentives for tackling these while being very clear of the non-negotiables in terms of a world where we all stand tall. So I want to stop here because all I want to do is really complement with some aspects that may really help move this agenda forward to inform the Global Fund rounds and other investments. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Archana, to give us an introduction about how the gender assessments, what the experiences on gender assessment on Sierra Leone and Morocco. That will give us a really good foundation to upcoming Angela presentation about how to do a gender assessment and why is it important for us to understand what it is and how it's doing. So I'm going to give the floor to Angela now from Women for Global Fund.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you to Archana and also Immaculate for the wonderful presentations. Can you just confirm that you can hear me properly?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. So today I'm going to talk about the gender assessments and how can we move to these gender responsive and transformative approaches that we urgently need for this new allocation cycle. I think it's really important for us to mobilize as my colleagues previously commented, and I'm going to talk about how can we do it. The next, please. So just quick reminders, I'm quite sure you might have heard this before, but this initiative was launched by UNAIDS almost 13 years ago. And this was launched in order to respond to the need specifically about the rights of women and girls within the HIV response and also later on with TB in the country level implementation. What we were looking for is to know and have the evidence-informed planning and budgeting for gender transformative HIV responses. And gender assessments are considered now the comprehensive initiatives for strategic planning processes, so we can increase the capacity of civil society and now including also women-led organizations. And with this, how can we leverage this political commitment? These gender assessments are enabling us and countries to better understand how gender inequality shapes the HIV response And what are these barriers that are limiting the access to the services, and how well these also national HIV responses are addressing them. It's important to understand the inequality to meet the needs of women and girls, specifically the youth, and also other key populations. I think it's really important to highlight that women advocates, we play and we leverage the gender assessments, and we influence the changes during the review of these national strategic plans also. And currently, it's really important that we do the same thing for the funding requests that are going to be submitted to the Global Fund. The next. Just like to not forget, I want to highlight like the current state of the gender-based violence. That is one also important aspect that we should consider in these gender assessments. And this is the map of prevalence that estimates the gender-based violence worldwide. And we can see that this is still a current and very high problem, as we also have an average of 800 people living still facing gender-based violence. And nearly 1 of 3 women have experienced any form of violence, at least in their lifetime. And this specifically comes from intimate partner violence and sexual violence and non-partner sexual violence. I think it's really important to keep in mind that we have still a long way to go and a lot of work to do specifically in our countries. The next one. And what do we want to achieve with these gender assessments? And I want to clarify what do we know about the gender responsive and transformative approaches. And first, here you can see an example of what can be a gender blind activity. And this is specifically if we only work on distributing, for example, condoms at health centers, we can see that this is something that can be gender blind. Then we have some gender sensitive activities that are still not enough. And we have gender transformative activities that can be, for example, leading peer behavior change, communication and social mobilization of women decision making. And then we have what we call recommended gender responsive and transformative approaches. And this is based on community. This is based on the understanding of the needs, and also is completed by this peer-led behavior change communications. It's really important to highlight that gender responsive and transformative approaches and actions are seeking to redefine and transform these gender norms and relations to readdress the existing inequalities that exist in our societies. And we need to promote and share the power among the communities. Also the control of resources, and this is really important for the Global Fund processes, and the decision-making process. I think this is key for highlighting the need to have women's empowerment in the funding requests that we are going to work in the Global Fund. The next, please. And what do we need? What's the process? I think it's really important to understand the context. And as also my colleagues mentioned before, it's important to unite and to work together and convene women in these communities to call for gender assessment. We need to highlight this. Plus, we need financial commitment as a very important key. We need support from other partners and donors from the same governments. And this is a key process for strategic collaboration. This gender assessment process requires a lot of preparation from the gender assessments. Of course, the knowledge of the HIV and TB epidemics in the country. And then we need like the identifications of the responses that are already in place in the specific countries. And then we can pass to the analysis and the use of the gender assessment findings for gender responsive and transformative HIV and TB responses. And afterwards, it's really important that we can use those analysis for development of this coastal national action plans and overcome these identified gaps and barriers that we have already identified with the data collection and the information that we have from the specific context. The next one, please. just like to highlight the gender assessment process, it has 4 stages. There's a complete guide that you can find in the document that we're going to share with you. And of course, we thank UNAIDS for this complete and comprehensive tool. I just want to highlight these 4 stages, and you can see in more detail. But the first one is preparing for the gender assessment, as I said before. This is ensuring how can we really commit to the highest level possible and to establish this gender assessment team. It's really important to convene on these women-led organizations, people living with HIV, women living with HIV. They are key on these transformative processes. And we need, of course, to develop this gender assessment framework and resource plan. Collect the key documentation and data, and organize, if possible, the first gender assessment workshop in which we can reinforce the strategic alliances between all of us. Then we, of course, can pass for the next step, and it's knowing and understanding the epidemic and the context. This is a really important stage in which we are going to understand and analyze the magnitude of the HIV epidemic in this specific epidemiological also and behavioral data. And as I said before, I think it's really important that we can focus also on gender-based violence, and sometimes this can be a really difficult topic to include in the gender assessments. And of course, as we know that the HIV epidemic is determined by contextual determinants of the social determinants of health, it's really important that we highlight these social, cultural, geographical norms that are sometimes barriers for the inclusion of women in the different processes. We need to advocate for this inclusion of meaningful participation of women, youngers, and the youth specifically in the CCMs, so we can also know and access more the data and the information it's discussed within these processes and these spaces. Then after we have this, we can also know the national HIV response, work with the Ministry of Health, work with the national health authorities, but also other intersectoral actors that are working in this, specifically in these plans. And I want to highlight the process of the investments and the budgetary allocation for and the expenditure that is planned for the next activities, and also work on the key components that are going to be included in the next plans, so they can be also used for the funding requests, in this case for the Global Fund. Really important also, as I said, to understand what's the level of coordination, the human resource capacity that we have, and the competences that we are going to allocate to every partner and every actor that is going to be in the process. And afterwards, it's important to analyze and use these gender assessment findings to really transform the activities that are going to be planned to be gender transformative HIV responses. These new activities are going to be responding to the gaps and needs of women in all of diversity, and we are going to work on this results-based planning, trying to be aligned to the UNAIDS also strategy and the political declaration of HIV that holds like the maximum commitments that our governments and countries have already agreed to comply in order that we can eliminate AIDS as a public health problem for 2030. Please, the next one. And just don't forget, I think this is an important tip, that all the actions and objectives that we are going to plan in this gender assessments and then also in the new like funding requests have to be smart. And this means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound to our context and to our important actions specifically for gender equality. The next one. And once we have complete these 4 stages, and once we have advocate for the gender assessment to be conducted in our countries, it's also important that we lobby, support, and verify for the inclusion of these gender assessment recommended interventions in the Global Fund concept notes and also the budgets. We need to report and mobilize additional financial resources in case they were not included. And this is also important because we need to know what was included, what we finally achieve, and if we find some other gaps, because we know that we cannot fund everything every time. We need also to use this gender assessment to mobilize on other resources and complete the comprehensive response. It's also really important that we can advocate to disseminate the gender assessment report, or at least, for example, the summary table of the interventions with other partners and stakeholders, that to create this awareness and to really strengthen the support for the implementation that we might need for the recommended HIV and also TB interventions. Please, the next. And as advocates, what can we do to create and keep on the momentum? It's really important that we can advocate in our countries to conduct gender assessments, and we can also follow the advices that we have heard from Immaculate and from Arshana before. We can contact UNAIDS in our countries, also the Stop TB Partnership or the RMB Malaria, to find out more how can we be included, what is happening in the moment, to know the time slots, to know where the meetings are going to be, and request to partner with them in order to be included in this dialogue and negotiation process. We need to make use of our national networks and international networks in order so we can size opportunities, share information, and understand more what is happening around the gender assessment and also around the funding request for the Global Fund. We need to engage more with the governments, and sometimes it's important that we can make links with some champions. And for example, just as an example, there is like some potential with first ladies that are sometimes leading the health sectors in the different countries. We can also request for workshops to strengthen national plans and write a statement. It's really useful to call for the gender assessment to happen in our specific context. I want to highlight this process because it's something that we can support also in the countries that we are working. This is a really important tool so we can keep on the momentum and request what we need to just diminish the gaps for the gender equality in the national HIV responses. And if you have already conducted the gender assessments, it's really important to review the funding requests that have been already sent, and assess how many of these recommendations are being supported there for the gender equality. Really important also to use the recommendations that we get from the gender assessments and to include those in our advocacy and accountability strategies in our organizations or in our movements. The next, please. Also, I just want to take this opportunity to invite you to join us. And our strength is rooted in building and sustaining connections among women in all of our diversity and build an effective global movement. Sorry for the typo there. We are around 250 advocates in more than 56 countries, and we are supporting and participating in the implementation of also these gender assessments and holding countries accountable for their actions regarding specifically the Global Fund. The next. If you have some other questions, we will be very happy to support, and please don't hesitate to contact us if you need more support in the processes of your country negotiations and the next funding requests. Thank you very much, Karen, and all the audience.
Thank you very much, Angela, for that comprehensive presentation. A lot of people were really interested in getting to know what is gender assessments and the outcome of it. So they asked if we can email or share the presentation, and we will. And also, you saw Angela's email if you have any more questions regarding gender assessment. We will be sharing the PowerPoint. And during this grant cycle, and the grant cycle 7, there is something that the Global Fund added, that is the gender equality marker. And it is essential that all proposals for the GC7 must have to follow this gender equality marker. But we just want to make sure that everyone is on the same boat as what is the gender equality marker, why they added it, why all countries have to do it. And how can we work with it? So we invited Thea Willis from the Global Fund just to explain to us and talk more about gender equality marker. So thank you, Thea, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of the other panelists. I've been listening with great interest. So many really interesting thoughts and perspectives, and advice and encouragement there. So I'm Thea Willis, and I work at the Global Fund Secretariat. I lead our work on health equity, which includes gender equality. And I'm just going to talk to you today about one thing that we're doing for the upcoming funding cycle to try and maximise gender equality. So if we move on to the next slide, I wanted to set this in context really, because I'm only talking to you today about the gender equality marker, but it's just one part of a whole range of things that we've been trying to do from the Secretariat to incentivise and strengthen gender equality in the next grant cycle. Because gender equality is such a huge priority for us, and I think I don't need to tell you why it's important, but I wanted to tell you that, you know, to the Global Fund, it is more important than ever. And I think what's different now is that there has always been a recognition that gender equality is something that we need to do. I think what shifted now is that we are really recognizing that we are not going to achieve our goals unless we prioritize it. It's not kind of, you know, a nice to do or an add-on or a siloed intervention. It needs to be at the heart of everything we're doing. And if that doesn't happen, we're going to fail. And I think that there is more of a recognition as well about all of the different myriad of ways in which gender influences health, and how actually when we incorporate a gender perspective, what we're doing is more effective and more sustainable. In addition to that, I think the Global Fund, as quite a powerful, influential global actor, has a really critical role, you know, not just maximizing gender equality for the end of, you know, as it contributes to disease outcomes, but actually in and of itself, you know, the money that we spend, the resources that we have, all of our interventions have the potential to either, or, you know, actually reinforce gender equality or mitigate it. And I think that the work that the Global Fund does is, in some cases, but also has a real potential to be a powerful tool in the fight for gender equality. And as we advance gender equality, we improve health outcomes, as we all know, so it's a virtuous cycle. So I think that the Global Fund has a responsibility and a really critical role to maximise gender equality. That said, next slide, please. One of the ways that we think that we, just to say, this is our strategy, and you can see that maximising health equity, gender equality and human rights has been elevated as one of the 3 objectives that we know that we need to fulfill in order to achieve our primary goal. And I think it's really important that it's been elevated in recognition of just how important it is for what we're doing. Okay, next slide, please. And one of the ways that we want to try and maximise gender equality is through the gender equality marker. And this is really in recognition of, you know, there has been lots of progress through Global Fund grants. There have been interventions focused on gender equality. But the lesson that we're learning and the message that we've been hearing really is that gender equality needs to be embedded across everything we do. It doesn't, the standalone initiatives are important and critical, and we need them, but actually we need to be better embedding gender equality across all of our funding, across all of our work. And let's be honest, that's where the bulk of the money goes. So I think that's where we have a real power and potential for change. So the gender equality marker is intended to be a tool to help us assess, first of all, how well we're doing at integrating that gender lens across all of our funding, but also then give us powerful information to improve. And it's deliberately going to be applied to all of our funding. And we're really deliberate and committed to that. It's not only certain portfolios, it's going to apply to all of our funding because we're really clear that gender equality needs to be embedded across all of our funding. And it's going to provide us information about where countries and grants are considering and addressing gender inequalities, but where also there are gaps, where we need to provide better support and resources. And it's also going to give us an estimate of how much of our overall investment is targeted towards gender transformative programming. And this is really critical for us because we really have raised our level of ambition in the new strategy from gender responsive to gender transformative. And that links to what I was saying earlier about recognizing the critical role we have in advancing gender equality. So our gender equality marker is based on the OECD gender equality marker. It's a 3-point scoring system. And we're going to score all of our funding requests against this criteria: 0, which means it doesn't have a gender equality lens; 1, it's a significant focus; or 2, it's a principal focus. So all of our money is going to be scored against this criteria. Next slide, please. I won't read through this in detail, but this just gives you a bit more detail about the criteria that we're using. It falls into sort of 3 main buckets, I would say. It's looking about how the gender assessment has been completed, whether the gender assessment has actually informed the funding request, and we have an assessment criteria that is a scoring criteria that goes into a lot more detail, and it really looks at the quality of the gender assessment, whether women and girls and gender diverse communities have participated and engaged in that gender assessment. So we're really looking for good quality gender assessments and how they've fed into the funding request. It looks at interventions. Do they explicitly contribute to advancing gender equality? Are we disaggregating our indicators and monitoring based on sex and gender? Are we using that information to routinely analyze, adapt, and improve our performance as it relates to gender equality? And what we really want this to do is, first of all, give us a good sense of where we are in terms of the funding that Global Fund provides and how well that's supporting gender equality. But see where we need to do more. We need to shine a light, and we need to understand where the challenges are. And we want to give a really supportive approach. So when we know that there are challenges, we want to support, encourage, help broker and facilitate resources to improve, so that hopefully at the time of the next funding cycle, we have all of our grants and all of the money that the Global Fund is spending helping to advance gender equality. And I'll just say a little bit about the process very quickly. So the countries are going to submit the funding request in line with all of the requirements in the application form and materials. Then our technical review panel are going to do this assessment, and I'm actually very excited about that because they're independent, which I think is really important. And they have really significant expertise in a range of areas. And I think that they will do a really robust assessment. So the TRP are going to be assessing and scoring against these criteria. And then what we're going to do with that information, we're going to look overall at how well the Global Fund's doing, what percentage of our funding is helping to advance gender equality, and where it isn't, what are we going to do about it? But as I mentioned to you a minute ago, we're going to shine a light on maybe there are areas where we're doing really well and there's good practice that we can try and roll out further. But there will be areas where we know that we need to do more. And that's the really important bit, to make sure that we take that information and we act on it to improve, because otherwise, we gather all this information. And the most critical thing is that we actually do something with it after that. Next slide, please. And I was thinking about how networks could engage in this, and I think that your engagement could be incredibly powerful to really help make this a success and make it really as meaningful as possible. I think firstly, to raise awareness, this is what we're doing. Actually, the Global Fund is going to be assessing all funding requests against this criteria, and they're all going to be scored. That information is going to be given up to our board, and all sorts of, it is something that's happening. And if countries, if we want to get ahead of it, then take a look at the criteria and think about that when designing funding requests. I actually think it's a very useful tool in just looking in a high level way about whether you're, making sure that the gender assessment is being used, how interventions are advancing gender equality, and how we're doing gender responsive monitoring and evaluation. Secondly, engage in the gender assessments. And, one of the criteria that we have for a good quality gender assessment is that it's developed with the full engagement of women in all their diversity. And that is so critical. So engage, and the previous panelists were giving some really, really great information on that. And then finally, I think there's a really powerful role in action and accountability where the scores are low. Why is that? Let's get to the root cause of that and what needs to change. What do we need to do about it? And we need to hold countries to account as well for that, and make sure that they're taking action to improve. So I think that this information is powerful, and let's use it to make sure that we have accountability, but also action and change and progress. Next slide, please. Okay, this is it for me, really. I'm not going to go into the gender assessment tools because we've talked a lot about them today already, but I wanted to flag that we have a new technical brief on gender equality. You can Google it, it's on the Global Fund website. It tells you more about the gender equality marker, but it also talks more about the shift in our ambition, from gender responsive to gender transformative. It gives really practical examples of gender responsive and gender transformative interventions for the diseases. And it's a really great tool, I think, to understand what the Global Fund ambition is on gender equality and some of the ways in which we're trying to get there. So I really encourage you to take that and use it as much as possible. That's it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dia, for sharing us about the gender equality marker and how the Global Fund has a new approach and a specific approach on gender equality. I see that we have a lot of questions in the Q&A section, and we have a hand raised. I just want to let you know that we will have a section of answering questions and your comments at the end. But right now, I want to pass the floor to our final panelist. It's from the regional platforms of the CRG, because we have talked about gender assessment, gender equality, the gender equality marker, and how to work with the outcomes. But one of the things that we also wanted to talk about is how to engage with TA providers, technical assistant providers on the gender assessment. And I want to give the floor to Ghana. Thank you, Ghana, for joining us today.
Just a moment. I hope you could hear me, and I will share the presentation and hope you could see the presentation.
We can hear you and see the presentation.
Good. I'm Hanna Dovbach. I'm from Eurasian Harm Reduction Association, and we are hosting one of the regional platforms as a component of community engagement strategic initiative. I will divide presentation on two parts. One about the community engagement strategic initiative, because that's important source of funding, a source of technical support for the preparing proposals and for conducting different types of assessment. I will be very fast, and sorry, interpreters, for this stamp. But what is important for us is that strategic initiative is a part of Global Fund work, but it's separate from the national grants. And it's very good for the countries where CCM or PR is not so, let's say, open for community engagement, because platforms and strategic initiative on community engagement could compensate it and give additional opportunities. As well as the kind of informing CCM about necessity to include some communities in the dialogue. That's also important part of our work. With the operational model of this strategic initiative, we have three components. One, it's this technical support I will focus on. The second component, it's long-term support to community networks, mainly global networks. And I could believe that you are working with a lot of global networks, global community networks, to receive some training and capacity building for you as activists. And the third component, it's work of the CRG platforms, and I will share emails of my colleagues in the last slide. So as for the technical support tracks for this specific grant cycle 7, sorry, it was named NFM4 before. We have really opportunity to support communities through technical support for any assessments connected to community rights, gender. And there is opportunity to do situational analysis, needs assessments, or any program review. So from this scope of technical support, the consultants to support you in developing some part of proposal, or in organizing face-to-face community consultation, or coordinating input of different communities into the proposal, and even making costing or supporting you in making costing of these parts in national proposals, which are now under development. That's something for which you could ask technical support. Challenge is the timeline. Because for those who are already applying end of this month, first window, it's impossible to apply, of course. For the second window, it kind of could be possible. For the third and fourth, you are very encouraged to apply for technical support. Application form is very simple, but you need to take into account that we need to find, for every application, we need some time to find the right consultant and to start this technical support and to give you result before the your proposal submission. Okay, with the request form, in every platform, there are people who are responsible for technical support and for coordination, and you always could write to them saying, please help me to formulate the request, or review the request, see if it's okay. And actually, we are working as a platforms for this technical support together with fund portfolio managers. So we always inform, at least in our platform in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, we always inform and coordinate this work with the fund portfolio manager, and they are from the Global Fund Secretariat, see what community are doing. And they could also encourage this attention from PR side to the community components. And there are some resources presentation will be shared with you. It's more or less straightforward, and there are in different languages. There are videos on platform. It's on our community engagement strategic initiative itself, and on the way how to apply for technical support. And here are the. So I will make a pause here for interpreters to relax and to breathe, and for you to make the picture of these emails, and all our colleagues really now mobilized and have even additional, at least in our platform, we have additional resources to be quick in providing resources for technical support in this funding cycle. And actually, what I wanted to say as an example, what we supported, what we managed to support in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and these examples not from this proposal development, because right now consultants already working, and this is consultants who support some communities as a really writing team. So communities coordinated between themselves, or it could be one community in one country. Community, I mean community network, like network of people using drugs in Ukraine. They requested technical support, and they found the Ukrainian language consultant from this technical support. And this consultant is sitting with them and helping them to formulate their proposal in the national proposal, national application. And these consultants are considered by the team who is writing the national application to the Global Fund, to Grant Cycle 7, as a part of this team. So there is the team of writers who are supported from different sources, let's say UNAIDS, and this consultant who is supported from technical support from the strategic initiative, they are considered as a part of the team. What is important that we are involving in this technical support, we are involving regional community networks, and that's very important part of the capacity building and technical support provision. And in the process of COVID-19, C19RM proposal writing, you remember this very fast and very intense process. We had very good experience with Eurasian Network, Women AIDS Network, EVNA, and their team of EVNA as a regional network, they became providers of technical support to their members in the countries to support country community of women living with HIV or affected by HIV in writing their part of the proposal. And this very important, like we are playing in the same time. That for me, this example of working through the regional networks, we had the same with EVNA. They did even through this technical support, they did have some gender assessment, and they did this proposal writing part as a component of their technical support. With the Eurasian movement for right to health in prisons, they also were involved in supporting their members and their community in writing the parts of the proposal. The same was with ECOM, who was supporting MSM, LGBTQI and transgender community in these components. So regional networks, in our case, in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, are very good, playing the role of very good resource for technical support and for peer technical support, because in regional networks we have very huge capacity of expertise in understanding all of the processes we are speaking today. So with the EVNA, for example, they are the most capable and the biggest expert in gender markers and in assessment of the gender sensitivity or gender transformative character of the services, and they are doing it for several years in the country, so they could provide members, community members, leaders of the grassroots community in the countries of the region, the good developed methodology for assessment, developed approaches, examples from the neighboring countries. So that's very good example of our cooperation with regional networks. I will stop here. Hopefully translators are survived after all these speeches.
Yeah.
Sorry for this.
No. Thank you, Ghana, for your presentation and to telling us how we can ask for technical assistance for all the platforms. We also be sharing Ghana's PowerPoint if you want to reach your regional platform. There's platforms all across the regions, so you can contact, ask for support or questions. Regarding questions, we have some questions right now in the Q&A tab. We have a few minutes to answer them, but I really want to touch on the first question that we got about Rose, from Rose Marcel. She said, could you please tell us in Cameroon, Gabon, CAR, and Chad, which ministries we can turn to in order to take part in this assessment? We are in Central Africa network of the International Community of Women Living with HIV. Thank you. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but this is about the gender assessments, and perhaps Angela or Thea can take into this question on how can we approach ministers or other stakeholders, or anyone from the panel.
I'll take the floor, Karen. Just important that we advocate, of course, for the inclusion of women in our diversity in the different dialogue processes. And how can we do that? As I indicated, probably we can write statements, we can write letters, we can plan workshops. There's always these ideas in which we can ask and demand for our rights with the government. How can we approach also? Let's participate on the CCMs, on the different processes regarding the national plan strategies that they are going to also interact. And we can also get invited, get also together with other communities, get organized. It's really important that we get organized among ourselves within our communities and within our organizations, so we can ask for this engagement and ask for this participation with the different governments, and not only the Ministry of Health, for example, but we can also approach the Ministry of Inclusion, the Ministry of Work, different intersectoral ministries that are working on the planning and budgeting for the national HIV responses, for example. And we can also approach, as I said, the different international organizations as the Global Fund, UNAIDS, other networks and communities, and we can also help you get in contact with the national authorities or with the networks that can support your engagement in the processes. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Angela. And also I want to highlight I don't know if Archana is still with us, but I want to highlight a comment that she made on the chat about tracking budgets allocated to and spent on gender transformative interventions in the HIV response. And I want to put on the spot, perhaps, to the Global Fund, to Thea, so we can expand more about what is tracking budget allocation to how we can budget gender transformative interventions for this global for this grant cycle.
Thank you. I think it's a really important comment, because what's critical is that the gender assessment is done, but it's meaningfully used. There are interventions that are specifically aiming to be gender transformative, and they're budgeted for, because so often there is a broken link. And from our perspective, one of the ways in which we are trying to incentivize and encourage that is one of the things that the gender equality marker will be looking at. In addition, when we're reviewing funding requests, it's also something that we're going to be looking out for, and it's specifically one of the criteria to see not only are there planned activities and interventions that speak to this, but they're also appropriately budgeted for. And it's not just going to be part of the community rights and gender review, but also our health financing department are also really clear that gender equality and health equity are a really key part of value for money. And if we don't have them, it's going to be hard to assess that investment as good value for money. So they will also be looking at the budget from that perspective and looking out to see whether the proposed budget and the budget lines in the funding request actually reflect the ambition and the activities that are set out in the funding request. So from our perspective, fully agree that link is critical, and we've put a couple of processes in place to try and assess that as we go through the funding request process.
Thank you so much, Thea. And just echoing Thea and Archana, these funds need to be allocated to gender assessments and work with women living with HIV. And also the funds need to be allocated to implement the budget lines. We also have a question on the Q&A tab from Ruth in saying women in older diversity, let's please ensure that women who use drugs in many countries, the population with highest HIV prevalence, highest rates of gender-based violence, are no longer left behind or out. I wonder if panelists have thought on how to actualize these aspirations. And yes, I was going to point out to Ghana.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in solidarity with Ruth's point. And yes, we are trying to encourage women using drugs in different countries to be specifically part of the discussion. It's not always, because with the proposal writing, usually we have one seat in CCM for people using drugs. And in this case, if there are no funding for making the broader consultation of all community and to bring together women using drugs and men using drugs, and could be LGBTQI using drugs, that could be very challengeable. But as again, you know that with the Eurasian network of people using drugs, as a network uniting and a lot of activists and very active in the region, with the narco-feminist movement, which is very active in the region, we are succeeding really have at least in let's say Ukraine and Moldova, we have some good consultation. It's more challengeable, let's say, in Kyrgyzstan, but still we are encouraging to include all the communities with the good representation of women using drugs. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ghana. I know we are at the top of the hour, already past the 90 minutes, but I don't want to pass on these comments from Rosa, and I want to put on the spot to Angela as well, just to make sure if we can expand more about these gender assessments that are independent from governments and ministries. It should be made by women living with HIV. Angela?
Yes, I'm here. I think it's really important to have this intersectoral view when we conduct the gender assessments, and this independent let's say this independent review of the gender gaps is really important to be as much as possible, and of course close to the evidence we can find with the data collection, with the analysis we make from the team. And that's why I indicated that's really important to concentrate on having this gender specific team that can work on the very first stage and can be consolidated and work with the different partners networks and include as much as possible the different networks and women-led organizations in this case that can contribute to the understanding of the gaps and needs specifically from women in all of diversity.
community. So I believe that evidence that's the main purposes for the gender assessment, to be guided, but the evidence we can find in the different contexts and countries, so we can plan accordingly and also budget in that sense.
Thank you, Angela. We have a follow-up question on that from Rosa about some experiences on the regions. I don't know if Women for Global Fund have done gender assessments in Latin America, because she asked some experiences in the region. But Rosa, you can also email the LAC platforms or email Angela to know more about some specific experiences in the regions.
In the region, we have not, in Latin America, we have not yet supported or conducted one gender assessments, but we will be happy in the near future to support organizations and advocates in the region to do in that way.
Thank you, Angela. And I think I missed the first question that we got about for Namibia. I don't know if Immaculate's still with us, but I want to point out this question and directly to Immaculate about how can we assist if CCMs are not interested in working with grassroots women and girls living with HIV. Immaculate?
Hi, Kellen. Yes, I'm still here. Thank you so much. And thank you all the speakers. And thank you, our listeners. Yes, so the question of how do we assess our CCM members who are not interested in the community? I don't know how it is done in other countries, but here is the CCM representatives are selected by the community. So Global Fund gives guidance on who is to sit on the CCM. So we know right from the start that civil society and community, we have 7 seats on CCM, which makes us actually the majority on CCM. So what the coordinator of CCM does is to go through the networks of the community. So we have a seat for people living with HIV, so meaning they'll send to national network of people living with HIV to nominate a member. We have a seat for young people living with HIV. So they send to the network of young people living with HIV to nominate. Same with the representative of civil society. So the nomination which comes from civil society means that the names people apply and they are vetted by the community. So the fact that it is the community that elects them to sit on these seats, then they are accountable to their community. And if I'm not wrong, the guidance from Global Fund, if the members are not performing, there is a way you can assess and still get them off the seat. So that there are guidelines on how a member can be removed from the CCM seat. So that community participation in electing the leaders to sit on the CCM makes you accountable. Unless if it is done differently in other countries, but if it is that, then you're able to hold your leaders accountable. Then to our counterparts in the government, what I know so as a practice, if you request, they allow you to be observer in their meetings if you put in a formal request. So if you strongly participate and be vigilant to follow up the process, you're able to hold the leaders accountable. So the whole issue is how are we empowered enough to closely follow up the process, and where we feel our representatives are not fully representing the voices of the community, then call them back and put them to account. I think that's what I can quickly share, but I think Wills can guide more. Yeah, from experience, really, for me, that's what I could share.
Oh, thank you very much, Immaculate. And yes, it's different in all in countries, but I think the engagement and the participatory work of women living with HIV should be accounted for in all countries as well. We are past the 6 minutes and I just want 7 minutes, and I just want to thank all of you for joining us today, and also for the amazing panelists that we had. And thank you for giving us your time and your expertise on talking about gender equality in the global fund processes. From ICW, we want to make this a webinar series and to talk about more in depth about how can we engage, how Women Living with HIV can engage throughout the GC7. And also on behalf of ICW, Women for Global Fund, and the Latin American platform, we thank you for your time. And we will be sharing the PowerPoints through the emails. And we will post the recordings on our website, on the 3 websites. I hope you have a fantastic day. And if you have any questions, just email us as well. Thank you very much for being here with us today. And thank you to the panelists.